In continuation of our coverage of the death of the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, Arise international correspondent Faith Orr has this report.
The death of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has sent shockwaves around the world. It comes at a time of heightened tensions in the Middle East surrounding Israel's war on Gaza. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has sought to reassure Iranians, telling them there will be no disruption to state affairs. The first vice president has already taken over, and an election is expected to be held within 50 days. But Raisi's death has come as a shock to many who expected the 63-year-old to eventually hold the role of supreme leader. He was a protege of Khamenei and thought likely to replace the 85-year-old. Raisi was a hardliner in Iranian politics. He was elected president on his second attempt in 2021 and oversaw a tightening of the country's morality laws. He led Iran during a time of public anger over a deteriorating standard of living, partly due to sanctions and what critics described as the prioritization of defense over domestic issues. In 2022, the death in custody of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini sparked public anger. She had been arrested by the morality police for allegedly not complying with hijab rules. Mass protests took place for months, with women burning their hijabs and cutting their hair in protest. Hundreds of people were killed and several were executed for their role in the unrest. Raisi took a tough approach on the international stage too. He was angered by the US withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal, defiantly announcing Iran was stepping up its nuclear program, but that it was not interested in a bomb. America imposed sanctions, severely impacting Iran's economy. To make matters worse for Raisi, COVID then hit. More than 97,000 people had died in Iran by August 2021. More recently, Raisi led Iran through a standoff with Israel over its war on Gaza. In early April, Israel attacked Iran's consulate in Damascus, killing a number of people, including commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. For almost 2 weeks, the world waited for Iran's response. Raisi did not disappoint, launching an unprecedented missile and drone attack on Israel. It was a diplomatic show of force, but it only led to minor damage and a token response. Raisi had close ties to all levels of the Iranian establishment. He began studying at the renowned Home Religious Seminary at the age of 15, learning under several Muslim scholars. In his early 20s, he was named as prosecutor in a number of cities, before going to Tehran to take up the role of deputy prosecutor. In 1983, he married Jamila Al-Malhoda. They would have 2 daughters. Later, he was part of a committee which oversaw executions of political prisoners. It made him unpopular among the opposition and led to the US imposing sanctions on him personally. Raisi would continue to rise through the ranks, becoming prosecutor of Tehran in 1989. He would cement his place in the country's establishment by becoming chairman of the biggest religious endowment in Mashhad in 2016. Raisi proved a controversial president, one that was viewed with suspicion by many on the international stage and reviled by his critics at home who thought his policies too hardline. But he maintained good relations with all branches of the government and military, and had close ties with Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and his predecessor, the late Ayatollah Khamenei. Ties that, had he survived, would almost certainly have seen him take ultimate power in Iran.
Well, messages of condolence for the Iranian president have been coming in from leaders around the world. Turkey's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, sent his best wishes to the Iranian people and government, describing Mr. Raisi as a brother. Qatar's Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani offered his condolences, describing the accident as painful. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said he was shocked by the news and said Mr. Raisi was an excellent human being and an unconditional friend. We also heard from the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, who offered condolences on behalf of the bloc for all those who died in the crash. Well, for more on that passing of the Iranian president, I'm joined in the studio by Arise international correspondent Faith Orr. Good to see you, Faith. What more do we know about the circumstances surrounding this helicopter crash that claimed Mr. Raisi's life?
Raisi had been at the border with Azerbaijan meeting the Azerbaijani president for the inauguration of a dam. He was then on his way to Tabriz when the crash happened. Now, the first reports were that it was just a hard landing, and some reports said he was missing, other reports said he was well. We know a number of countries helped in the search efforts. Russia, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, even the EU contributed to this. In the end, it was a Turkish drone that found the wreckage in a very mountainous area in northwest Iran. Now, there was debris seen at the scene. We know that State TV has said the helicopter came down because of bad weather, because of fog and rain. Now, it's not unusual for there to be air crashes in Iran. Many people there blame America for this because sanctions over the years have made it very, very difficult for them to maintain aircraft. They don't have spare parts, for instance. One of the passengers did survive for some time. He was an imam. We know he survived about an hour. He actually managed to make contact with the presidential office, but obviously no one could get there in time. The funeral for most people on board is expected to be held tomorrow. That does include Raisi.
Right, and what do we know about the other people who were travelling in that helicopter who also got killed?
So there were 9 people in total on board the helicopter. That included the flight crew. We know that when the bodies were found, they weren't in a very good condition. They were burned, but the officials said there's no DNA tests needed. They know who the people are. So as well as Ibrahim Raisi, the late president, there was also the foreign minister, Hossein Amir Abdulhayan, the governor of the East Azerbaijan province, Malik Ramati, the Tabriz's Friday prayer leader, the imam that I mentioned, Ayatollah Muhammad Ali Hashim. There was also the commander of the president's protection unit, the head of the president's security team, 2 pilots and 1 technician there. We know that the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has ordered 5 days of mourning for everyone on board. Well, for the president, but obviously there was 8 other people with him as well.
And what are you hearing about the reaction in Iran to the president's death? I expect it's been mixed, given how divisive a figure President Raisi was.
It's been very, very mixed. There has been an outpouring of grief from his supporters. We have seen Iranians flooding into the squares in Tehran for a mourning ceremony. They're carrying his photo. But there's also been fireworks and cheering since his death was confirmed. Raisi wasn't always a popular figure. The activists who have been campaigning for more human rights, more freedoms in the country, are in little mood to mourn his death. They really are. They blame him for tens of thousands of arrests, hundreds of deaths in his time in power. Some of the fireworks have been let off in a town called Sakez. Now, that is the hometown of Mahsa Amini, the 22-year-old woman whose death sparked protests in 2022. So her, we've seen relatives not just of her, but of other people who have been killed in protests. They're out on the streets, they are cheering. We've also seen military stationed in the streets. And there has been an edict during these 5 days of mourning. You are not allowed to show happiness sadness for his death, but because people seem to be in no mood to follow orders, we do expect there to be arrests in this time. I mean, as I say, we're seeing cheering in the street, we're seeing cars out honking their horns, we're seeing fireworks being let off. People in the streets are saying that they want the rest of the ruling class to follow a similar fate. We are also going to see a state funeral. Now that is going to be a projection of power because the Iranian Ali Khamenei and the rest of the ruling class, they are aware that the world is watching, so they are going to show strength and they are going to show unity.
So what do you reckon happens next with all this in Iran?
Well, we know that the new interim president has already been named, Mohammad Mokhbar. We know that the first cabinet meeting has already been held. The new president described the helicopter crash as a serious incident, but he said everyone should continue on with their roles despite the incident. In no way will this tragic incident interfere with the government and the running of our country. I mean, it's consequential. The president has been lost, the foreign minister has been lost. But Raisi was by no means the most powerful man in the country and not even the strongest president that Iran has seen. Iran's will continue with the status quo. The man who's been named as the interim president is seen as a hardliner, is seen as someone who can replace him. I expect the way to be cleared and him to become the new president within the next 50 days.
Faith, thanks very much indeed. Faith Orr is a Rise International correspondent.